My name is Paula Jordan. I'm part of the community relations team here in the UP. Today is our passwords. So hopefully, if you have any questions or anything, he's going to walk through passwords to two-factor authentication.
I hate passwords because I always forget them and they don't jive.
All right.
Username,
Yep.
Password.
Yes.
That's what I have on, in my tablet recorded.
Right. There you go. Exactly. So we've got James Martis and Tanya Sullivan. And then we've got looks like Bruce Moore is watching as well. So welcome to Highland, and if you have a question, feel free to ask James.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for offering it, and then also with the food. I didn't expect that.
Oh yeah, that's lunch and learn.
Excuse me, I need to shut this down.
No problem. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you, Paula. As we always note at the beginning of these sessions, this is part of Highline Academy, which is really a larger program to provide educational resources, training, and to close the digital divide in Michigan, particularly in the UP and the Thumb. And as I mentioned earlier, please interrupt me. This is supposed to be interactive. We want to answer questions, and if we don't know the answers, we'll find them out for you. So this is Passwords 101. It's all about passwords, security, credentials, why it's increasingly important to have hard to know passwords. In fact, so hard to know that you shouldn't know them. And we'll get to how that works with a password manager. But with that, let's move along. So obviously a password is just a set of characters or words to authenticate access to a digital system, right? We type in our username, which by default is normally our email address, but a lot of times we just use our name, and then we have a password. Hat tip, something to keep in mind as we go through this presentation: if we're generating a difficult password using a password generator, which is the ideal, and we'll get to that, if the application you're using allows you to make up your own username rather than using an email address, which I would argue is a security failure if they require that or do that by default, you can also generate a password as your username. And then when you're using a password manager, it's just going to fill that all in for you. So you don't need to know that. So now you've made essentially two passwords, making it much more difficult for someone to break into one of your accounts. So just, something to keep in mind as we go through this. But here are some password statistics that you need to know of why this is an important topic and why it's increasingly an issue, not just in this country, but throughout the world. Some people can have as many as 85 passwords. And you're thinking, 85, how is that possible? I, for example, have 356. That's what I checked before creating the session. Now, the reason I have 356 is because I have passwords for many of my clients and their accounts. So I'm managing literally hundreds of passwords. There's no way for me to possibly know what all those passwords are, particularly without reusing a password, which is a big no-no in security. And so you think, how do I have 85? Well, you've got maybe multiple social media accounts, maybe multiple email accounts, certainly a personal email and a work email, sometimes 2 or 3 personal emails. If you buy hardware tools and you want to, get the warranty or register them online, you got to create an account there. If you've got a Nest thermostat or a Ring doorbell, and so forth, right? And so before you know it, you end up with almost 100 passwords that technically you need to know or that you're managing. Another thing to keep in mind, a 12-character password is 62 trillion times more difficult to crack compared to a 6-character password. You're thinking, how can that possibly be? Well, for every character, think about it. You have 26 letters, lowercase, 26 letters, uppercase. You have 0 through 9, which is 10 additional numbers. And then you have all of the characters or symbols that you can use on your keyboard. For each character, you have that many options, which thereby increases the number of permutations that someone would have to use or a computer would have to use to try to crack a password. And the more characters you have, the much harder it is to use. In fact, The standard now, and we'll get through this throughout the presentation, is to have at least 16 character passwords. That means there should be 16, letters, numbers, and symbols in your password. Multi-factor authentication, and don't worry, we're going to cover this a little later, also known as two-step verification or two-factor authentication, blocks almost 100% of all attacks. And we're going to get to why that is and why that's so important, because when you're logging in with your password, when you require another factor, your password being a factor, your username being a factor, if you require an additional factor, getting a texted code that you also have to add in, that makes it that much more difficult to break into your account. Keep in mind, too, that hackers have published as many as 555 million stolen passwords on the dark web since 2017, and this was data from back in 2020. So we're already, 4 years away from that. So it's, a good bet to think we already have well over 1 billion passwords on the dark web that have been posted for other criminals and hackers to use, or they purchase these data breaches and then try to exploit them. 80% of hacking incidents are caused by stolen or reused login information. And I want you to keep in mind the stolen or reused, because when you get hacked, and there's actually a great example I'm going to cover here, because so many people reuse their password, if I'm a hacker or a criminal and I get access to your username and password for one account, unfortunately, the likelihood is I'm then going to have access to multiple accounts, because we tend to use the same password for multiple accounts. Almost half of internet users still use the same password for all of their accounts, and that is horrible, right? Because, and if you get exploited, your life is going to be turned upside down. And 60% of people say they're just lazy about it, right? It's just too hard, or they don't know what to do, so they just use the same password. Maybe they change it once every year or two, but it's likely or arguably probably too easy to guess. But this is an interesting statistic, and it's something we're going to cover in this session. 44% of US respondents, at least in this survey, said they use a password manager of some sort, and that's good. So if you're not in that group, you're going to want to be by the end of this session. There's one thing you're going to learn today is I got to have tough passwords. I need to get a password manager of some sort, and I should turn on multi-factor authentication or two-step verification or two-factor authentication, as it's called. Those are the three things that I hope this gets you to do after this session. And here are some other interesting facts that are related to the workplace, but I think it also really relates to us personally, right? 31% of workers use their child's name or birthday for their passwords. My partner, Tanya Sullivan's on this session, and I'm sure she can attest to that. 44% of workers reuse passwords across personal and work-related accounts. So think about that. That's almost half. So half of workers are using the same password for work accounts and personal accounts. So if I get breached in one, that could potentially breach accounts for my work, or at least for 44% of workers. Almost 60% of workers write down their passwords on sticky notes. So, they just have it around their desk or on the back of their computer, right? Which obviously is not necessarily the best security protocol to have in keeping your super secret password super secret. Almost 2/3 of workers share their passwords via email or text message. Obviously, the danger of that, right? Because if your text message isn't encrypted or your email isn't encrypted, and you've been hacked, or you have malware on your computer, or you have a virus on your computer, and someone's getting copies of what you're sending, they're also getting copies of your password. Half note passwords in unprotected plain text documents. So think about that. So half of workers will just use like a Word document, a plain text document, and just type in their passwords so that way they can remember them. So obviously that's exploited. And think about the number of ways this can be exploited, and we're going to cover this a little more later on, but data breaches. We hear about these, it seems like, at least monthly, if not weekly, and quite frankly, they happen more often than that. They probably are happening daily. We just don't ever hear about them. And by data breaches, I mean somebody else, a hacker, someone who's up to no good, getting data from a company. But that data is our data, right? Because we're the customers of companies. And so then they're getting our emails and our passwords that we often reuse. So if they steal all of the Target data one day or Walmart data another day, they then might have my password for my bank account because I use the same password for my login for Walmart, right? And so that's how this works. A report shows that employees reuse password 13 times on average. So just reusing passwords, even for work accounts, and the danger of doing that. And almost 2/3 of companies have more than 500 passwords that do not expire. And so this deals with companies who don't require passwords to be remade, say every 6 months or 3 months, or maybe even 12 months. They just don't have an expiration date. So if you have a password forever, obviously the likelihood that that could be exploited increases. So it should be pretty obvious that we need strong passwords to protect our data, to protect our money, and to protect our identities, all of which can be a headache no matter how you look at it. If your password or your credentials get exploited, you don't want to be dealing with a bank if your account has been zeroed out. And you may not be familiar with this agency, but it's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, referred to as CISA. It's an agency under the Department of Homeland Security. And one of their mandates is they work to provide consumer or citizen protections for cyber crimes. We're going to cover some of their recommendations here now, but I want to lead with a story that they have on their own website. And in this case, it's about this woman named Emma. And she got a text message that she had transferred out $700 from her bank account. She sees this text message and she's like, oh, I didn't do that, right? So she logs into her bank account. Oh, I can't log into my bank account. Oh, that's weird. Well, let me reset my password. So she reset her password, but she couldn't get into her email address either. Because however she was exploited, that person had gotten access to her email and or her bank account and figured out it was the other one, and then changed her password on both her bank account and her email. Now, I want you to think about how many hours it must have taken her to address that issue. If she had a Gmail account, you don't just call Google, okay? No one on this or this listening to this has just picked up the phone and called Google to say, hey, Google, I can't log into my account. It doesn't work that way, okay? But now your bank account was connected to her Gmail address. So now her bank's like, well, we can't reset your email because it's going to go to your Gmail, which you don't have access to. And then going through all of this rigmarole of trying to unwind that and proving who you are, you just imagine how many hours that would have taken. And in her case, it was only $700. I'm not saying only. I mean, imagine though if she'd been zeroed out. What kind of pain that she would be going through, or what a hassle that would be. So CISA, or this agency under the Department of Homeland Security, says we've got essentially 3 rules. And the first one is make your passwords long. And as I mentioned earlier, the standard is at least 16 characters. Now, there are times when you're logging into an account or creating an account, no matter who it's for, that they have their own parameters, right? Where often they'll say you have to do at least these things, right? You have to have an uppercase letter and a lowercase letter and at least one symbol, and it has to be at least, usually it's 8 characters long. But if it allows you to have longer characters, you should do 16 or more. Now, the downside to that is there's no way you're going to remember that, and that's good, and that's why you're going to need a password manager, but I'll get to that. But obviously, the longer the password, the better the password. Their second bit of advice is to make sure that they're random. And there's a couple of ways you can do that, right? You're going to use a mixed case of letters, so uppercase and lowercase numbers and symbols. Or you can use what's called a passphrase, right? A few unrelated words put together, and then maybe making a play on how you spell them or write them out. So imagine, here's one very straightforward one. horse, purple hat, run, bacon, shoes, right? And you put some phrase together that's just random words together that maybe means something to you, but wouldn't mean anything to anybody else. And then you start changing the way you would spell it. Maybe do it phonetically, change vowels for numbers, O's could become zeros, and so forth, right? It's a little easier to remember, right? But still a lot harder to guess. So, that's something to keep in mind. But I have one here bolded because the strongest one here is this one here, right? This makes sense to nobody, and no one's just going to know that. Figuring this out is going to be incredibly difficult, where this is actually arguably easier to guess. But in any case, those are options for creating random passwords. And their third main bit of advice, make them unique, meaning you've got to use different passwords for different accounts. You should not reuse your passwords, because once you do, you're vulnerable to getting exploited when your data ultimately will end up on the dark web. And I'm going to show you why that's true later on. But if you think that your passwords already don't exist on a file that criminals and hackers can use, you're wrong. And I'll show you where you can go to find out why that is. And so when you see that, you're going to see, uh-oh, is that a common password that I used in that account that was hacked? Because now that person technically has access to additional accounts. Now, those are the three main rules that CISA, this agency under the Department of Homeland Security, gives us. But they obviously acknowledge it's going to be too hard to remember all those passwords, so you're going to want a password manager. And that password manager is designed to keep all of those passwords that you're not going to know what they are anymore, right? You're going to generate a random password. Doesn't matter what it is. Then you put it in that account, but you let your password manager keep it, right? That's where it's going to be. And then when you go back to that account that you want to use, your password manager will automatically autofill that password in your username when you're signing in, making it really easy for you, but much harder for someone to break into that account. So yeah, why get a password manager? We have too many passwords, and we need something to manage them. Now, internet browsers do offer rudimentary password management. And whether it's Chrome or Safari or etc., you're going to have at least an option, and that is better than nothing. So that's certainly true. I would just keep in mind that little add-on feature to a browser, that's all it is, right? Whereas a password manager, it is a dedicated program or tool with a singular goal of password management, and they continue to add features. They continue to be state-of-the-art. They continue to add options like biometrics or facial recognition. And what I mean by that is if I'm logging into an account, let's say I'm logging into, Kroger, a grocery store chain. I need to log into to order groceries from my local grocery store. And I've got to enter in my information. My password manager will let me just look at it right through my iPhone and then fill in the password and the username and let me log in, right? Because my password manager is connected to my facial recognition, and therefore it then fills it in for me. And again, I couldn't even tell you what my grocery store password is because I don't know it. It's in my password manager, and it's a very long character string. One note though, for Apple, and I'm a Mac user, Apple's Mac OS password manager is a pretty good free option. But again, I would argue really like in the realm of browsers, it's just not a dedicated manager for that. That's not its singular purpose. And they're really quite affordable. In fact, we're going to cover here that in a second. So my suggestion to you would be to decide on one and get one. So what are some options out there? Well, in preparation for this session, I went to Wired, CNET, and TechRadar. And there are many password managers out there, but I wanted to pick three of the big four and just tell you how they currently, literally for 2024, if not late 2023, ranked password managers. Wired said the best for most people is Bitwarden. CNET called it the best overall. TechRadar said it's the best free version because there is a free version of Bitwarden. So, Bitwarden gets a lot of high praises. The best upgrade if you're moving from a free option like a browser or Apple's Mac OS password is 1Password. CNET says it's the best premium password manager, and TechRadar says it's best for families. And full disclosure, I use 1Password, so I'm most familiar with that one because that's the one I've been using for years. Wired says the best full-featured one is Dashlane. It also says it's best for large families versus families TechRadar, and best that it offers the best security. I would argue I think they're all pretty good on the security side, but in any event, you see that these are really 3 of arguably the big 4 or 5 or 6 of them that are out there, but there are many out there. I just wanted you to see how other technology, publications would rank some of these passwords managers. And don't worry, they're actually quite affordable. Now, again, I said I use 1Password right now, and you can get an individual so in other words, just for yourself, but use on all of your devices for as little as $2.99 a month if billed annually, or $5, $4.99 a month for family. That means that would cover everyone in your family could have 1Password to manage their passwords. Bitwarden, I noted, had a free account, and so there is a free option. Sometimes on free accounts, you're limited to the number of passwords, or they don't tell you if you have a weak password. Sometimes you just don't get all the features, but again, it's better than nothing, and certainly better than just using the browser extension password manager is to use Bitwarden's free version. But they have one for, $1 a month, or $10 billed annually, or $3.33 a month, or $40 billed annually for families. So, again, quite affordable. It's really a no-brainer when you consider how important this is. And then there's Dashlane. So this is just to give you an idea of what these things cost. Again, there are other options out there. There are some cheaper ones if that's an issue. Just keep in mind, you're going to want a password manager when you're wanting to beef up your password security. And setting them up is actually quite easy. The only thing you're going to have to remember is your master password for your password manager. And that's why you want to create a strong master password. And that's likely why, and I mentioned earlier, so I'm going to skip back here, I mentioned that passphrase, right? Unless you're really good at remembering something like this, which would be ideal, but I can't do that. But Tanya, my coworker, she probably could. I can't do that. I can do something like this, right? And I can do something like this. And so I can call it, I can say, I'm going to have a passphrase that I'm going to spell phonetically, and I'm going to replace, say, certain vowels or all vowels with numbers that make sense to me, right, to make that much harder. But then I only have to remember that one password, that strong master password that will then manage all of my other passwords. So that's really all there is to it, because after that, these are just how it really kind of works. Usually the password manager will also ask you if you want to turn on multi-factor or 2-factor authentication. You don't have to. I would recommend it, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that is, but that's essentially another factor like getting a texted code before you can access your password manager. Then you download the browser extension. So say, for example, you use Safari or Chrome or Firefox, whatever your browser is. When you purchase that password manager, it lets you download a program so that it's then built into your browser, and then it's then a tool within your web browser, so then you can autofill your passwords and your credentials when you're logging into your accounts. And you can put it on your computers, your phones, your tablets, etc., anything that you're doing to log into things. I'm going to show you an example here, but then within the web page, it'll have a little icon, usually within the field you're filling in, to say, hey, access your password manager to fill in all of this information, right? And that's all you have to do. The password manager also generates passwords for you. It has a password generator in them. There are free password generators online. You can just Google them. password generator, and it'll just, develop a string of letters and numbers and symbols, which is good to do. But these password managers also have that feature built in. And remember, 16 characters is the ideal count limit for the number of passwords. And if you're not going to set up multi-factor authentication for your password manager, you should set it up for individual accounts. So for example, your bank account. Log into your bank account, make sure you've got that strong password that's at least 16 characters, and then set up multi-factor or two-step or two-factor verification, which requires a code to be texted to you. That's the most standard way, but it could be emailed to you. It could require facial recognition if you're using something through your phone, or biometrics. Sometimes it's a fingerprint, depending, again, usually on your phone or if you have that technology. But the most common is just to get a text message to your phone. So when you log in, it requires that code as well before you can get in. And remember, 99.9% of attacks are prevented when you add an extra factor, right? And so that's really critical. But just to give you an example, this is one with for 1Password. But imagine I was on a web page and I needed to fill in my email address and password, right? This little symbol for 1Password is in here, at least how it works on my machine or on my phone, right? Or on my phone, it says, hey, passwords, and I select 1Password, and then I use facial recognition, and then it fills in all the information. It's that simple. That's all I have to do. So I don't have to type in anything. I don't have to know anything. And ideally, it doesn't ask you for an email address. It asks for username. And as I mentioned earlier, sort of a hat tip that you don't tend to see out here, but I would argue we should be doing, your username should also be a 16-character string of letters, numbers, and symbols, right? Add an extra level of making it hard to break into your accounts. And you don't have to remember it if you're using a password manager. Now, as I said, these password managers are powerful tools. They're not just holding a password for you. So you're thinking, what are all of these other tools that they would have? Well, number one, you have vaults. And in this case, for 1Password, that's what they call them. Maybe I have one for home, maybe I have one for work, etc. I may have one for kids. And so what that means is, imagine I have a shared account for like Netflix, right? You get a Netflix account, you say, hey kids, I have a family account. We can all watch Netflix because I'm paying for the family account. Well, they all need my password, right, for Netflix. Well, if my kids have 1Password, and then I've got my Netflix in my kid's account, then they have it as well. So then if for whatever reason I need to change it, it changes for everyone. Everyone knows it all of a sudden. I mean, they don't know it, right? It's not in their head. It's in their password manager and automatically gets updated. The same goes for work. If my coworker is using 1Password and I have to change an account that we all need to use together for whatever reason, my coworker doesn't have to know what it is because it's already updated in her vault. So when she's signing in, it just uses the correct new password. There are other features that they use, though, where you can add in your credit card information or your debit card information so that when you're using this information online, it's your password manager that's entering in this information, and you're not putting it physically on your computer. You're putting it within the password manager. 1Password, for example, also has what they call Watchtower, but they all kind of have something similar where it'll update you to tell you, hey, you have an account here, and we know that that's been a compromised company or website. So you should go change that password, right? In this case, it's also showing, this isn't mine, this is an example, that, in this account, there are 12 reused passwords. So it's kind of like, show me what those are, let me go change those, right? So I'm not using the same password. And in this case, it's even saying, hey, you got 76 weak ones, right? Well, show me which ones those are and let me go change those, right, and make them more difficult, right? So it provides these kinds of features out there, and really so you can share them appropriately. And it's interesting when I use the word share because, again, you don't even know what they are because they're just in your password manager. You're just getting to use them to log into the account. Now, I'll also mention that there is multi-factor authentication. Again, multi-factor authentication, MFA, or two-step verification, or two-factor authentication, sometimes abbreviated 2FA. 2FA, or two-step, is really a subset of multi-factor authentication. Multi really meaning more, or multi, right? Two just meaning two. And that means it's usually just your password and then the extra one that it's giving you. Or multi could be, you could require 3, 4, or 5 if that application allows that and you want to set that up, right? We're like, I want multiple things. Sometimes there's the option to say, don't log me into something if I'm not in Texas, right? If I'm only going to be in Texas, you require like a geofence. So if anyone's trying to log into my account from anywhere outside of Texas, definitely don't allow that to happen, right? That could be an extra factor, for example, that some accounts would allow you to do. All I'm saying is at least require a texted code to your phone. We all have cell phones. It's quick. And so when you say, hey, just send me the code, you get it's usually a 6-digit code. You type in the 6-digit code, and then you can access the account. And that's really all multi-factor authentication is. You've likely been forced to do this with some accounts. Some accounts no longer even ask you if you want it, right? It requires you to do it. You try to log in and it says, good, you entered in your username and password, now we're going to send you a code. And you have to do it, right? And then it sends it to your cell phone that you have in your account, and then you get a code, right, to log in. What that is two-step verification or two-factor authentication. And all I'm recommending is make sure when you log into your accounts next time that you turn that on to require it. Again, stops 99.9% of attacks because it's requiring that extra factor. But as I mentioned, other factors could be an additional password or passcode or PIN. Some even require an extra USB drive, that a USB drive be put into your computer before it allows you to access. You know, that's obviously a higher level of security, but something you're certainly capable of doing if you want it. Or fingerprint or facial recognition, as I mentioned, and that's normally empowered by our cell phones today. So we've covered passwords, how they should be hard and long, and why we need password managers, and why we should turn on multi-factor authentication. But there's something more you need to know because, unfortunately, as I said, our passwords are already out on the dark web. And I would be shocked. I think Tanya should give you $100 if your password's not out there. Not my money, but Tanya's money. Because of data breaches. And we hear about these things increasingly commonly. And keep in mind, the only reason we hear about them oftentimes is because of the hacker or a third party. I'm going to show you here some data here that it's only about a third of the time that we ever actually even hear about a data breach from the company itself. And that assumes that the company even knows about it. And I've got a statistic that I'm going to show you here in a minute that it often takes a company over 200 days on average to even figure out it's been breached, to even know. And that doesn't mean they tell us that they got breached, right? To even figure out that they got breached. So a data breach happens. And in this case, just this year alone, we got over 700 million records already breached. And we're only in March, right? So someone breaks into someone's account or some company account, they steal all those records, and then they want to sell those records or share them with other criminals online. And just to give you an example of some things that happen routinely that we don't always recognize. You got 15 million records stolen from Trello back just this January. I have a Trello account, so my data was hacked just right there. Over 16 million records at Loan Depot, almost 15 million at i4Fraud. You got to appreciate the irony there, right? A fraud company, they got breached just in January. You've got over 183 million records at Pure Incubation, 385 million records at ZenLayer, and over 6 terabytes of data breached at Optum. You're like, who's Optum? I don't know who Optum is. Looked it up, a subsidiary of United Healthcare. I'm a United Healthcare customer. how much you want to bet that they share their data with their subsidiary to try to sell additional services? Bet you I was breached there as well. So that's just, you know, in the first 3 months of 2024, I was breached, and I didn't search for this data. This was just with the data that I was finding from the previous article. This is how common this is. And if I had the same password and used more than once, imagine what a hacker would be able to do with all of my other accounts. But here's some more. This is from last year. T-Mobile, 37 million. I like how they worded victims, because that's what we are when these companies get breached like this. 37 million victims. Xfinity, right? One of the largest cable operators in the country, 36 million records. People Connect, that's an HR software. This is what companies use. Nation Star Mortgage. Think about your mortgage data. What kind of more information does our mortgage company have? Not just our username and password, often our social security number, usually our bank information. Right now, we don't know in this particular case what records were stolen, but just imagine, depending on what the data is that got pulled out, how somebody could be exploited or then their identity stolen with all of that data and so forth. And so, as I said, through some surveys that were recently done, on average over 204 days just to identify a data breach, and then another 73 to contain it, to figure out how it happened and how to stop it. Again, that doesn't say they ever even told us about it. These are just the ones we know about. 45% of Americans have had their personal info compromised by a data breach in the last 5 years. That's half of Americans, right? This is from last year. So half of Americans have been compromised in the last 5 years. I'm shocked that it's even that low. I just told you, just by happenstance, 2 of my accounts were hacked just in the last 3 months. Or not, I was hacked, but there were data breaches. 86% of data breaches involve the use of stolen credentials. What are stolen credentials? That's what we're talking about, passwords. Your username and your password are your 2 main credentials, and 86% of data breaches involve that. So imagine what that means for companies, much less for us as personal individuals. And here's the kicker here. 40% of breaches were identified by a benign third party or outsider. So that's usually sort of the white hat hacker, or the smart data scientist who recognizes that something went on or something was stolen and it's posted on the dark web, and then writes a story or lets a reporter know about it. Right? It's not the company, it's not the bad guy. It's just a third party, benign party. Only a third were identified by internal teams, and 27% of breaches were disclosed by the attacker themselves, right? Because maybe it's ransomware, and they're saying, we got your data. If we removed it from your computer systems, and if you want it back, you got to pay us money, right? So just keep that in mind. So of all the data breaches that we hear about, I would be shocked if we're even finding out about half of them. So what to do about that, right? How do I figure out, have I been breached? Have I been pawned? That's actually the word. Pawned is another word for, or at least an older word that was used for data breaches. Have I been pawned, which is just have I been pawned without an A, is a free resource for anyone to quickly assess if they have been put at risk due to an online breach. So just for example, for the purposes of this session, I put in my work email address, okay? And here are some of the results of my work email address, at least what it was showing me a couple days ago. It said I've been pawned 19 times. Pawned meaning my email address shows up in 19 different data breaches, right? Whether it's in the dark web or known breaches that have happened, okay? And so here's the first one. This is a stock photography program. We're a marketing and business consulting firm. We use stock photography. This is an application that I've used before. So, and it says my email address, my computer's IP address, my name, my password, my phone number, my physical address, and my username was in that data breach. Well, great. So now some hacker knows all of that information about me. And again, if I had reused that password in other accounts, that person would be able to obviously crack those accounts as well. But here are some other things that it recently said. This is an alleged AT&T one of March 2024. You'll notice I already mentioned there were 2 that I've been hacked or I've been part of a data breach. This is a 3rd one just in this year alone that my information has been found in a data breach. And in this case, my date of birth, my email address, if I had uploaded a government issue ID, you know, sometimes they ask you to take a picture of your ID, that would have been compromised here as well. My name, phone number, and physical address. Now you notice in this case, it wasn't a password, but nonetheless, if you're trying to steal someone's identity, wouldn't this be a whole lot of good information? Particularly my government issued ID that has my license number on it, and then so forth. So imagine, so it's great to go to sites like this. Again, have I been pawned? So that you can know where is my information out there, and I better go to those accounts and change those passwords for those accounts. And if I reuse that password on any other account, I've got to go change it there as well. It even lets you check pawned passwords. So you can actually type in the password to see how often that password or if that password has been pawned. So, you know, I pawned this, I searched this password. I was like, well, what if somebody thought they were being tricky and they changed the S's to dollar signs and the O to a 0 and put an exclamation point, and they thought, well, this is my way around using the word password and I'm being sneaky. Nope, been used 149 different breaches. This has been used. So this is a known password, right? No matter how so tricky someone thinks they are, because it's too easy. And that's why you want 16-character passwords with a mixture of gobbledygook of lowercase, uppercase letters, numbers, and symbols. And you might think, you know, how do they, again, how do attackers do this stuff? Well, if they can get your password for one account, right? That attacker then has your compromised credentials. Then they start attacking multiple websites, multiple accounts. And so you might think, well, I have a different username for this other account, so at least they won't be able to. That's not how it works. Once they've got your password, they're assuming they're going to use that password and that username combination with every other site they think you might be using botnets or just computer terminals that just start attacking other websites, bank accounts, 401k accounts, whatever is out there, with different combinations, using the combinations that they have on you to ultimately exploit your data. Now, Have I Been Pawned is a free resource. Another great free resource. Oh, something to keep in mind. At Have I Been Pawned, there's a notify me option. Okay, it's free, doesn't cost you anything. You can put in your email address, say you're not a robot, and it'll then let you know if your email address ever comes up in a future data breach, at least from what they're tracking. So that can be helpful, right? So at least you get a notification if you forget to periodically check on your own. But you can also just periodically check on your own. This is something to remember, haveibeenpawned.com. But another option that also provides a free search, there is a paid version to provide some additional features, but it's also very intuitive and very comprehensive, and that is fsecure.com, f-secure.com. Here, you click on the free tools, you'll end up on the identity theft checker. You can type in your email address, and it does something similar, right? Where it scans the data breaches and the dark web to see, has that email address been compromised? And before I show you their report, because I also did it there, I want to show you how it differs from how I've been pawned. This is what their guidance is, and I want you to note how it mirrors what CISA, again, that agency under the Department of Homeland Security, says. Change your password and have unique ones for all accounts, and use a password generator coupled with a password manager. This is just the reality of where we are and where we need to be. But I mentioned I typed in my work email address, and it showed 32 breaches. Okay. Also showed, AT&T subscriber data. And then it showed, these other options, and I didn't show all 32. I just took a screenshot of the first one. But even Park Mobile, and it kind of made me laugh because I actually used Park Mobile the other day in Dallas, and I didn't realize that that's something I need to make sure that I have that I've updated that password because it was involved in a prior breach. So again, in summary, I said 3 things at the beginning of this session. You want to use a strong password. You can use free password generators out there, but password managers have them. And by strong, we want at least 16 characters, a combination of all of this, right? Lowercase, uppercase, numbers, and symbols. Remember, you make it almost trillions times harder every time you add the number of characters. However, no way we're going to remember all this. So we need a password manager, right? And that's what makes it easy. That's what makes it intuitive. It actually even makes it easier than using simple passwords that slightly differ at all, because then you're like, did I use that this time? My kid's name and birthday, or was it my birthday or kid's name? And which kids did I use? And whose birthday was it? And what anniversary was I using? Right? The password manager, I don't know any of my passwords anymore. The only password I know is my password manager's password. That strong master password, and it fills in everything for me. It's very intuitive, it's very fast, and I am that much more secure. So hard passwords, password manager, and then the final third step is to turn on that multi-factor authentication, again sometimes called 2FA or two-factor or two-step authentication, to require that extra factor, which I would say just get the text message to your phone of the code and then type in the code, enter the code. On Apple devices, I don't use Android devices. It's the application so smart that when the code comes, the text message says, do you want us to just fill in this code? So I'm not even typing in the code. I just wait a few seconds, the code comes, I just press it, and it enters the code automatically. That's separate from the password manager. That's just Apple recognizing you've received a code because you're trying to log into an account. So we'll enter it in for you, right? So takes 2 or 3 seconds me logging into accounts now. It is so much easier, and I'm so much more secure by using a password manager. So with that, we have come to the end. So James, do you have any questions or final thoughts or comments?
I have a couple, you might say. I also am an iMac user. It's an older one, and I'm going to be either updating it or get a new computer entirely. Now, I don't know how old yours is. Mine is a dinosaur, really. Would it be advisable to update it, go to AppleWorks, and try to get a new system downloaded, or would it be better, do you think, to get a brand new computer altogether?
Well, I would say you can get a password manager now regardless. I mean, do you also use a smartphone? Do you have an iPhone?
Correct.
I mean, truthfully, James, I mean, I don't know how, we all have our personal preferences, but I would bet you use your phone a lot logging into accounts. So you have that benefit already there. They sync together, right? And so it just makes sense. It doesn't put it's not a heavy program, so it's not going to slow your computer down any more than it already is. I don't know that I would say anyone has to go buy a new computer for a password manager. But as someone who likes new computers and you let my boss know, she's on here, I would like a new computer too. I think what's most important is just to get the password manager.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's just a question. I think I know the answer, but I want to make sure. What the password manager, as such, you enter the one strong password, and the manager takes care of all the other stuff. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's a loaded question to realize that. Let's get this way. Have you had to change your master password because of situations that have developed with hackers or scams or whatever?
It's a very
No, it's
personal.
not a question.
That's a very personal question, James. But truthfully, I have not. Now, my master password is a turn on a phrase that I knew as a child. That I actually, it's a common phrase that some people know, but I remembered it incorrectly as a child. So if someone knew my phrase, they're not going to guess it for two reasons. One, I remembered it incorrectly, which I find kind of funny. And two, I then modified the way I write in, like the way I use numbers,
Excuse me, I didn't mean to get into a personal, just wondering, like on a timeline. Okay.
Right now, I just wanted to explain. So that's on the one hand, you're right on changing your master password, but that's one reason I feel like I don't have to. But in thinking about that master password, if you forget that master password, you are going to be up a creek, right? Because the master password doesn't want to let you get into there, right? Now, 1Password also has a master key that when you're initially setting up the account, now I don't know this for all the accounts, I can just tell you from 1Password's process, where you have the master password and it has a master key, which it says, hey, if you want to print this out, print it out now, and then go hide it somewhere, right? So if you ever need access back into here because for whatever reason you forget your master password, you can always use this master key to get back into your account. But no, I've never heard of the master pass or the password generators getting breached or hacked. That to my knowledge has not happened, and certainly not with the big ones that I mentioned here. Is that your question?
That answers it. Yeah. Also, as little information as such, the example you used about she had her account broken into or scammed. I had much the same situation. I mean, there's items coming up on my charge card that I did not purchase. And it took me, quite a few phone calls, and I would get a new credit card almost every couple of weeks until finally it got taken care of. And I did change passwords and all that. And so when I found out that this is going to be dealing with passwords, I thought, okay, I got to get educated.
I hear you. Mine, I had that happened with me with a big box do-it-yourself home repair store, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
One of the two. And I had purchased an air conditioning system, and they had this option where it was 2 years free financing on a store's line of credit. Right? I thought, well, that's great. I get 2 years free financing, and I had to buy this expensive air conditioning system. And so I paid it off within the 2 years, and then I didn't think about it, right? I didn't think that I had opened up a big box store credit card, but that's what I had done. And 2 or 3 years later, I was sitting here. I work from here, and I got a text message that said I had purchased $387 from one of the stores in my metro area. I'm like, what? And first I thought it was like a phishing attack where they want you to click and you down, but I still had the file with this information in a drawer. And so I called them and I said, yeah, I just got this text message like 10 minutes ago. I didn't buy this. And they were like, oh, that wasn't you. And I said, no, I'm sitting here at my computer. And they said, okay, we're going to shut that down. I said, okay, thank you very much. And I said, I'm not responsible for that. And they said, no, you're totally fine. We're going to shut this down. I said, okay, thank you very much. And I hung up. Well, I didn't realize what they were telling me was they're going to shut down that account, which automatically then recreates a new account. Well, this guy had stolen my identity. He actually had a state issue, looked like a state issue ID with my name on it. Long story short, James, this guy hit this different big box home repair store all throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth region. We have a lot of cities with a lot of these stores. Okay. And every time and it took me a while to figure out why, because he would just show up and say, hey, I'm this guy, but I don't remember my account number. And they'd be like, oh, well, we'll look you up, James. And they did. They looked him up because he had this ID. And I kept, and finally I said, you need to stop this. So finally they stopped recreating the account, but then they wanted me to pay for all of these charges. This took me over a year to clear up. And in the end, they only removed half of them. It was only after I wrote very long explanations to like the Consumer Protection Bureau that they actually finally reached out to me and said, we see, you know, from this perspective, and finally cut it out. Now, in that case, that was, I don't know what they did. I don't know if they ever stole the password. I don't know how they did it, but they had there was their picture on an ID that looked like me. One police agency showed me that. So you can imagine from this other woman that they described earlier, that Sissa, right, where they got her bank account password and her email password. Getting your email password is horrible, right? Because all of our accounts are associated with our email. Right? If you no longer have a work email address, every account is on. I mean, at least I have a combination of some things, you know, where if one email got compromised, I would still have the other one. So if you don't have a backup email address, or someone hacks your email and they take control of it, that you're in a world of hurt, right? Every account is going back to that email address, right? And if they change your phone number, so imagine if I broke into your Gmail and then I changed your phone number. So now when you try to reset your password, it comes back to my phone that I've now set up on your account, right? And I change your backup email address to one that I control. Right now, I can get access to all of your accounts. So just keep that in mind. Now, Google and, you know, the larger email providers are getting smarter, right? Where they don't always let you do that without getting a texted code, because they recognize that in some sense, they're the last line of defense, right? Because if that gets compromised, that person can compromise all of your accounts, usually, right? There's a good chance that they can anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Huge headache. Huge headache.
Oh, yes, yes, it was. My total was, excuse me, $1,500 roughly in items that were purchased using my account and my name and all that, and my card. So it, excuse me, like you just mentioned, it can be worrisome. You know, the mental anguish one goes through. What do I have to do to get company A, B, and C off my back?
And you know, just to, you know, related to this, and I appreciate you sharing that, because again, it's why it's important, because it's going to happen. And keep in mind that just for this session, right, I used my work email address, and I've been at this company for a while, but my personal email I've had for, you know, almost 30 years, right? My work email is about half that time. And my work email alone has been, according to Have I Been Pwned, in 19 data breaches, right? And according to F-Secure, what did it say? 32 breaches, right? And that's for an email account that I've only had for a decade and a half, not one that I've had for 3 decades, right? And so just imagine how many more accounts are out there, or how many more breaches my personal email has been in. And all the information that they're getting. And if somebody got multiple, right, if there was somebody out there on the dark web, or whoever's doing these breaches, start combining information from different breaches, right? Which is easy to do. Email address here, add in the other information we don't have. They can build whole profiles on people, right? And it is inevitable, unfortunately, that this happens. I mean, I could spend a whole hour just talking about data breaches that happen, and how we don't know about how most of them even occur. Sometimes the companies don't know that they happened, right? And when you consider all of the information we're giving, I mean, at one level, you know, the fact that we're even giving our biometrics, right? It's like, I hope Apple's never hacked, right? Because now you have a whole look of my face and every angle of it, right? So again, which really leads me back to, that's why we want strong passwords, and you want that password manager. And then using these kinds of services that are free to keep us informed, or at least for us to do periodic searches. Hey, is my data out there? And, you know, where should I be updating my information, updating my password?
Well, one of the things, and I thank you for, haveibeenpwned.com site. When I get home, I'm gonna get on my computer and do some checking, and to see what I need to do, where I need to do it, what I need to change, or what have you. And I willing to bet 9 to 5 that I'm gonna need to make some changes with passwords or maybe even my email, I don't know. So I've had my email for 40 years, a long time.
James, are you a current customer of Highline?
At the present time, no, I hope to become one in the near future as such. In fact, that's what, well, I can ask Pamela.
Paula.
Paula, okay, sorry, well, I got the P and the A right, so, yeah, anyway, Paula, about, I'm with Spectrum, and I'm unhappy, found out, that you folks offer a better package, better quality, faster quality, and I was told that you folks offer cell phone usage.
You can use it for Wi-Fi calling. So if you have a cell phone, you can hook up to your Wi-Fi at home and do Wi-Fi calling and texting and email and all that from your
You know,
phone.
how would that affect me if I'm out and about?
If you're out and about, your cell phone is going to be on the towers. You know, on like AT&T, Verizon, whatever, over the air towers. that we have
Okay, so
here, yeah.
now, do you folks have a usage of towers? Okay, because I'm just wondering,
You still need to keep your cell phone plan.
okay, so I need to stay with Spectrum then, as far as the cell phone.
Oh,
I have-
your cell phone is through Spectrum?
Yes,
Okay.
see, that's what I gotta figure out. I gotta make some phone calls and find out, because I've heard, you know, this person says this, another person says something similar, but it's a little different. So I want to find out for sure.
I think Tanya was gonna tell you about.
Oh, I'm
the-
sorry,
the
Tanya.
Yeah,
security.
no, that's okay. I think you'll have a great conversation with Paula on the benefits of Highline. But one of the things that Highline does offer is a level of security with the app that comes with your internet service. And so Paula, I just wanted to, make a suggestion that you walk him through the Command IQ and all of those things that come with the Highline service, which is another level of security.
Comes on, we have a Highline Fast app that you download when you research service from Highline.
Okay.
It's got security features in it.
Okay. Yeah, excuse me, Nick, when he stopped by the other day, kind of gave me a nutshell,
Mhm.
short version of what transpires and everything else. I said, okay, I've been talking about it, now it's time to move.
Yeah.
And to give you some idea, if I'm correct, I'm gonna be saving at least $110 a month.
I was gonna say, if you're paying for Spectrum content that's not streaming, you are gonna save a lot of money, and you'll want to go to the Highline Academy YouTube channel and get the skinny on how to start streaming, and we can make sure that you get access to that. But I bet you will be saving money by moving to Highline. And
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going to get amazing customer service.
Like I said, I've heard from several people. One's a good friend of mine. She has mentioned that they switched whenever it was here, in Escanaba area, and faster service. But I mean, if there's a problem, also, I'm thinking charter speed is 300. Yours is what, 400 or 500?
It-
We offer a 400.
400, okay. But anyway, it's faster, better quality of picture. Of course, that goes with the speed. And very pleased.
That's good to hear.